Hi everybody. Today we're going to be talking about Adobe XD. XD is a design and prototyping software used to create websites, mobile apps, or any type of digital user experience. So when I first open XD, you'll see this intro screen here. I can create a new file, or I can open any of my existing projects. I can start a new file with any of the preset screen sizes. So if I click this drop down, there's some additional mobile screen sizes, or I can start a desktop. I could drop in a desktop artboard. Any of my recent projects are down here as well. Or if I have any files that I have saved on the cloud, this file section is where all of my cloud files are going to live. So all of my files or any of the projects that might have been shared with me, I can access those here. So I'm going to start with a iPhone 10. So I'm going to click on this, and that's going to start a new file, and it's going to drop in the artboard of the preset that I selected. Up at the top here, if I click on this, this will allow me to change the name and save this to my Creative Cloud. So I'm going to call this demo file. And when I click save, that's just going to add that to my files on the cloud. If for some reason you don't want to save this project to the cloud, you can go up to File, Save as Local Document, and this is just going to save this to your computer. It's not going to live on the cloud. But it's if this is something that you might want to be sharing with other students or sharing with your professor, it might make more sense for this to live on the cloud. It really depends on what type of project this is going to be. So before we go into talking about the rest of the UI, let me switch this to a demo file that I've been working on. This is a example UI kit that I was able to find through Adobe's website. So if anyone is curious in this, if you go up to File, there's actually a Get UI Kits option, and this will take you to the Adobe website. And there are tons of UI kits and templates that you can download to kind of get a feel for how some other design teams are using XD. So how they build their design system, maybe how they build some pages, how they build some components. So I think this is really helpful to kind of get an understanding of how to use XD. So I think that's a really important asset to use. So let's take a look at the XD UI. So up here in the top left corner, you see there's a design tab, a prototype tab, and a share tab. Most of our designing is going to be done in the design tab. This is where we're going to build our screens, build components, add any styles. That's all going to be done in the design tab. Once we're finished and we're ready to take all of our screens and we're ready to actually make it interactive, that's when we'll switch over to the prototype tab, and we're going to talk about that in another video. When you're ready to share your project with another, either with a student or with a professor, if you go to the Share tab, you can see that anything that is prototyped, you'll be able to share that prototype with other people. So right now, I have this set to design review. If you're sharing this with a professor, really anybody, design review is pretty standard. There, all these other options are, if you were using this in the industry and maybe you were sharing this with the development team, you can share this with them. If you're maybe giving a presentation to a stakeholder, that's what you could use this link for. Or if you were building a prototype for user testing, that option is available here too. But we're just going to set this to design review. And then you have some options for different access. So you can if you want people to who have been invited to access this, or if you want to add a password for additional security as well. But when this is ready to be shared, you can just do create link, and that's going to generate a link for you to be able to share this with other people. So I'm going to go back to the design tab. So looking at your tools panel over here on the left, this is your standard shape tools. So you can draw a rectangle, you have your ellipse tool, and you have your polygon tool. All of these also have keyboard shortcuts. So if I hover over this, you'll see that R is for rectangle, the ellipse is E, and then the polygon is actually Y. And same thing with the Y, with the polygon tool. If I press the up arrow on my keyboard, I can add additional points to my shape. You can also add a simple line to this, and you can also draw with the pen tool. And this is the same pen tool that it functions the same way that it does in Illustrator. You can draw anchor points, and you can use the corner radius or the anchors to change the shape. Some people find it's easier to use the pen tool in Illustrator, especially if you're going to be designing a logo or icons, whatever it is. You can use the pen tool in Illustrator, and then with Creative Cloud, with the libraries, you can actually pull that from Illustrator over to XD. And I'll talk a little bit about libraries in a second, but totally up to you what you're more comfortable with, if you'd rather use the pen tool in Illustrator or if you want to build simple shapes here in XD. I have my text options here. I can drop in some text. I can say, hello, everybody. And I'm just going to bump this text up so you can see it. All of my text options are here as well. So if you want to change the font, you can do that here. I can adjust the size, the weight. I'm going to set this to Allegria Sans. And then you have your weight options here. So these are all your text options. If you want to play around with the tracking or the leading here, or the line height. And then you have some additional options like caps, if you want to add a subscript or a superscript, things like that. All of your text options are there. And this panel is dynamic based off of whatever things you have selected. So if I have a shape selected, you see I can go down here to my appearance panel. I can adjust the opacity. I can play with blending modes. I can add radius, corner radius here. So if I bump that up, I can do that either here in the appearance panel, or if I select the shape, I can also adjust the corner radius there. And if you wanted to do custom corner radius, maybe you wanted to just do one angle or one corner, you can also hold Option or Alt, and you can then adjust one of the only corners. You can adjust one corner for the corner radius. So you can do that way. You also have your alignment options here as well. So you can select multiple objects and then align to left. You can have them center aligned or aligned to the middle. So if I was doing multiple shapes like this, you can align to the middle that way. I can change the fill color here. I can change the border color here. You have some additional border options. So if I wanted to bump this up and make the border thicker, I can do that. And then in your fill options, you can also do solid color, linear, gradients, different options like that. If there are colors that you're using that you want to use in different places, you can also add swatches down here as well. So if you click this little plus button, you can actually save that color as a swatch to be able to use in other places. So instead of having to go through and try to match that color or use the eyedrop, you can just quickly add the color that way. The next tool I'm going to show is the artboard tool. So you can either click on the artboard tool here, or you can press A. I can click and drag to do a custom artboard, or I can select the artboard tool, and you see that all the presets that were available on that intro screen are available here as well. So there's more options, some additional screen sizes. I've got tablet or desktop options are here as well. So if I want to do, let's say if I want to drop in an iPhone 13, I can click on that and it'll just add it next to the current artboard that I'm working on. I can duplicate this. I can just hold Option or Alt and I can click and drag. I can also do Command or Control D and it'll add another artboard off to the side there. If I want to double click on the text here, I can change the name of this. So I can say Artboard 1. You can change the text that way. And another important thing I want to show you is that these artboards all represent the screens that you're going to be designing. So when you first drop in an artboard, the default size that you see at these presets, these are going to be that screen width, that viewport, or the screen height. That's going to be the viewport. Anything that, if I was to take this and stretch out the artboard and make it taller, you can see that this little dotted line here shows up. That just means that this is the area that's going to be outside of that initial viewport. This is going to be the scrollable content. So anything that exists below this line is going to be scrollable. If you have something like a navigation or like a navigation or a menu at the top here, those things, if you want them to be anchored to that to the bottom of that page in your viewport, you can actually anchor that here, and then anything that's below this line is going to be scrollable content. So I can actually show you what that looks like in this demo file. If I go over here to this screen right here, you can see if I click on this, it's the same presets, and you can see that this little line here divides. This is that initial viewport. Anything from here and above is that what's going to be visible when you first looking at the screen, and anything below that is going to be scrollable content. And so this is what I was saying. Anything that you have like a navigation or something that you want anchored to the bottom of the screen, you can actually fix the position when scrolling, so that way this will stay anchored. I also have this stuff at the top here is anchored as well. So any of the additional content that isn't anchored or doesn't have that fixed position is going to scroll. So if I click on this, you can actually see whenever you're previewing a prototype or you want to see what it looks like on the actual screen, there's a play button up here, so I can click on this, and that'll open this preview, so I can preview this on my desktop. If you're working on a mobile screen like this, you can actually plug in your phone, plug in a mobile device to your computer. You can actually preview this mobile app on your phone, which is pretty cool. So you can do that. If you decide that you want to view it on your phone and interact with the prototype just the way you would on your mobile device, you can do that. But for this instance, we're going to just preview this on the desktop. And then you can see anything that's below this line, you can see is going to be the scrollable content. And then because I have this navigation anchored to the bottom here, that's going to stay fixed. So if I scroll, anything that I don't have that fixed position is going to scroll below the anchored items. So that's one thing to think about when you're working with artboards, is that your artboards are going to represent whatever the content or whatever those screens are going to be in your page. So every single one of these screens is going to every single one of these artboards is going to represent a different screen in my prototype. And then, as always, the longer and more content your page is going to be, the longer your actual artboard is going to be. So you have to just make sure that accommodate for all the scrollable content. Cool. So next thing I'm going to show you is the document assets. So this is where you can get to your cloud documents. So anything you have saved in your libraries on the cloud, you can actually go back to. I just clicked on. It'll default to document assets, but if you click on that, this will open up your Creative Cloud libraries. So any of the color palettes and assets or imagery, anything that you have on your libraries, you can open this here. So if you're working on a design system or on a project in Illustrator and you have it saved to your library, you can open that here. We're going to work with this document assets. So in this file, they have already created a design system. So if I go up here, you can see that they already have all the character styles, all the color styles. They even have some components and icons already built. So if you look, everything that was predetermined. So we have the primary colors, the type colors, secondary colors. Those were already all added here. I did add this dark purple to kind of show you. Let me delete that. I'll kind of show you how to add another color to your assets. So if I draw a new shape, I'm going to turn off the border for this. I'm gonna add that muted purple again. So let's make that. Cool. So now that I have my shape, I have my fill. I'm going to go up here to my colors, and I'm going to click on this plus button, and that's just going to add that to my assets. And this is going to be a global swatch. So this is pretty much the way that swatches works in Illustrator. This is going to be where I can make that global change. So I'm actually going to double click that. I'm going to call this dark purple. And so that just means that anywhere that I have that shape applied or anywhere that I have that swatch applied, I can draw a new shape, go over here, click on colors, and it'll apply that. And then the nice thing about this is because these are global, I can actually right click and I can edit this color. So if I decided to maybe I wasn't a fan of how light this was, I want to make that a little bit darker, I can actually drop that color down. You can see that it's going to make that change globally across all of the shapes that I have that style applied. And then I also have my text options here as well. So all of my character styles that I have saved are here. So if I want to draw out a new text frame, I can go over here and I can select body copy, and you can see that it'll drop in. It'll change that style based off of the preset character styles. So depending on the project, if you're working on a design system, you can add all of your character styles here. So that way you don't have to go through and manually adjust this. You can apply your styles as you're building out your screens. And then if you're working with any components, we're not going to worry about components right now. But this is, if you build components, you can add those here, and then it allows you to just quickly drop in any component that you might be working on that you might need, which is pretty cool. Last thing I want to cover here is the layers panel. So if we go down here under the libraries, you see I have all of my artboards are listed out here. it functions, the layers panel functions the same way as it does in Illustrator and in Photoshop. If I select one of these artboards, you can see it'll highlight over here. You can also click in here and it'll drop into that artboard. You can see all the layers that make up that artboard. So if you are viewing it this way, you will have to double click. So let's say we're looking at easy track activities. If I wanted to go into that, I can just double click and it will jump me to that artboard and I can see all of the layers inside of that. Okay, so now that we have the basics of XD, let's take what we learned to create a low fidelity wireframe. Just like print-based projects, it's important to lay out the foundation of your designs first, either by sketching out layouts or by framing out the content using grayscale shapes or placeholder text. Wireframes allow designers to only focus on the general layout of the design and focus on the experience as a whole instead of being bogged down on specific details. Typically, we would follow a standard design process by sketching out our screen designs first and then creating wireframes. And then after all of that, we'll add the additional visual styling like color, typography, imagery, things like that. For this example, we're going to take this and we're going to reverse the process and we're going to retroactively build a wireframe from an existing website. So what I'm doing here is I wanted to show you, this is just to kind of preview when you're first, this is to give you an example of what that viewport looks like when we were talking about artboards. If I was to drop in this artboard here, let's do the iPhone 13. Like I was showing over here, if I would drag this down, this line here, that is what it represents the viewport or the line, the initial height of that screen. And what that just means is that here in this, if we were to take this artboard, it just means that this is where that blue line would live. This is just the end of that initial viewport. And so when you're looking at your screen, this is what you might see. But what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be taking all of the content on that website, all of the scrolling content, and we're just going to lay it out in a wireframe. So I'm going to open this in another tab here. Let's go back. So we're going to be looking at burb.com. And so what you can do, whatever makes more sense, if it makes sense to take screenshots, or to just go section by section and kind of take a look at what are the things that, what is the content on this page, what are the different elements that you're going to have to lay out, whatever makes more sense to you. I'm going to take a look at this, just to preview it on the actual, website. And then we're going to take a look at how it compares with one of the screenshots that I had taken. So when we first come here, you'll see you have the navigation here at the top. I've got my logo. I've got some navigation items here. And then I have a CTA. I have a button here, the Get Started button up in the navigation. I have my main primary heading. This might be my heading 1. And then I have some imagery. I have a tagline, or this is my hero section up here. This whole section is my hero. I might have a subheading or a heading 2, and then I have that same CTA here as well. And so and then I have the scrolling options, these scrolling text down here. Now, when I'm wireframing this out, or if I was doing this in the beginning, I would sketch out this whole top section. I would draw this out, and I would only use general shapes and placeholder text. I wouldn't actually worry too much about making this look perfect. So if I go back to my wireframe example, you can see that I took a look at the navigation at the top. I didn't actually use the logo image. I just used this a rectangle with an X through it. This is how you can represent imagery, is just by drawing a box with an X through it. I have placeholder text for my items, and I'm not worried too much about the type here. Also, I just kind of used Roboto by default. And then I also built a grayscale button here. I did use the same text. I could have used placeholder text as well, but it's a grayscale button. I'm not too worried too much about the color. I put some big text here, and then I also added a big rectangle with an X through it to represent the imagery that I have placed here, and then I have some text and the button here as well. So you can see how I didn't worry too much about the imagery, the text, or the color. Whether it was the right font size. All I did was very quickly take a look at the layout and try to place in placeholder shapes or placeholder content, so that way I'm looking at the general structure instead of worrying too much about all those additional things. So if we go through this, you can see anything that I have an image, I'm using that shape with an X here. I'm using placeholder text, some lorem ipsum text, and then anywhere that there's another image, you can see that's overlapping here. And one thing too that I will show you if I go back, you'll notice as I scroll down this page, if I was to scroll up, you can see how the navigation will pop up here. That might be a little confusing when you're wireframing. You might think, do I have to draw this or do I have to wireframe this for every single section? You don't have to worry about that. Once you wireframe a specific component like the navigation, all that's going to do is it's just going to be anchored to the top of the page. So once you do it up here, it's just going to be anchored. You don't have to worry about doing that multiple times. And that goes for anything that's anchored. So as you saw in the other example, I had my, in the mobile example I was looking at, the navigation that was at the bottom. Yes, the content scrolled, but it was actually anchored to the bottom of that initial viewport. So you don't have to worry about doing this or having to wireframe this navigation multiple times. So as I go through and look at the different sections, you can see I've got another heading section. So this might be like the main header. This might be header 2. And then I have a new section here. So I have like a header 3 or header 4 with some body text or some subhead. And then I have a link here. And then I have some areas for my imagery. So I did the same thing here. I looked at I started to mock up and kind of lay out that content. So I'm using gray here. So I have blacks. I'm using blacks and grays. I have some subhead, body text, and then I've got links. And then anywhere that these images lie, I have some big X's, big blocks with X's in them to represent that shape. And I'm just going through very quickly laying out this content. I'm not worried too much about how it looks as long as it has that general structure. So I'm using grays, and you can see here I'm using gray in the background here to represent this this green. So this is what we mean by using grayscale. You can use grays, different varying levels of grays, to represent the different colors in your wireframe to represent the different sections. So I'm not focused on whether I'm putting actual content in there, just all placeholder. Same with the imagery. And then getting down to the bottom, this big image, I'm just using a big block. So you can see this didn't take me very long to do. It's and the nice thing about this is that once you have some content that you're working with, you've actually built out some of these wireframes, you can just duplicate this. I can take this whole section, I can copy all of these things, and I can just carry them over and duplicate and make another section. So it's really just, you're doing this pretty quickly. You're not getting too caught up in the actual content. All right, so that's how we wireframe out a desktop. Now, how do we do this for mobile? So here, as I was showing with the viewport, that's where that line would be. Anything that's below that line is going to be the scrollable content. And so when you are working on responsive websites, when I say responsive, basically that means that it's going to take the initial desktop version, this 14 by 1440 pixel desktop website, and it's going to have to shrink and scale everything down and reformat so that it can be able to view on a website. So when we say responsive, that just means that all of the content that was initially on that desktop website is going to change the way it's oriented. It's going to start stacking. The text is going to change color. Some of the images might shrink. And this page is going to get much longer because the content is stacking. So when you're doing out when you're building out your wireframes, you are just going to keep in mind that because you're taking content that used to live on this super wide website, now all of that content needs to stack to be able to fit inside of this mobile screen. So your your artboards are actually going to be pretty long. To do this, if you can open this on your phone, whatever makes more sense, or what you can do too is if you go to your website, this works in Google Chrome. It's similar to any other browsers you might be using. But if you right click and then go to inspect, or if you go up to edit, view, developer, and then you can do inspect element or developer tools. And what that'll open is it'll open up the developer tools over here on the right hand side. And if you look at the top left corner, there's this little preview, this little device toolbar. If I click on that, it will open up the responsive view, and I can actually click on this drop down and I can preview this on any different types of devices. So if I want to open this on an iPhone SE, that's the 375 pixel width that I'm actually working on my wireframe. And so now it actually takes my website and it shrinks it down and makes it the responsive view of what this would look like on a mobile screen. And so now you can either take screenshots of this, or you can just scroll through and build your wireframe off to the side. So if you want to have your window on one screen or on one side of your screen, and then build your wireframe over on the other side, this is how you can view the mobile experience. You can also do this on your phone, whatever makes more sense to you. But I like to do this to be able to see how this responds. If this is something you like, that you think is pretty cool, you can also change this to responsive. You can actually grab this handle here to see, as the screen size comes down, you can actually see how that content will start to reflow. This is this content. See, it actually kind of breaks here. This is in between main breakpoints, so you can see once I get down to 768, I think. Yeah, once it gets down to 768, that's a tablet view. You can see how everything starts to kind of reflow. And so we'll go down to 375, which is the screen we've been working on. And you can see how it goes from that initial desktop version where you have this big text, the image is off to the left, and then you've got the text on the right. If I scale this down, you can see, if I go all the way down to the website version, or to the mobile version, you can see how that how the text kind of reflows. The styling is a little different to fit the smaller viewport, and then the button changes a little bit too. So as you're wireframing out, it's important to take a look at how these things restructure and reflow, and you'll be representing that in your wireframe. So you can see I took the same approach. I actually used the desktop wireframe to build this out. So I just kind of laid out all the content, used the same shapes with X's to represent imagery, and then I just laid out all the content, and I tried to make sure that I was focusing on just the general layout, not worrying about adding imagery or color or anything like that, and using varying grays and blacks to represent the different colors in the different sections. All right, so this is wireframing. We're just using general shapes, using your text fields, and playing around with artboards. Hopefully this makes sense, and I hope you have a great time wireframing out your websites.